All right.
Longboard.
Longboard. Is it my turn or yours?
It's mine. And
Take it.
I'm throwing Longboard in D tier. Or maybe high D tier. I think it's fine. I think it's fine. You're collecting cards to build them up in kind of lost cities, ascending numbers. The cool wrinkle of it is that you can take other people's cards. They're open hands, and so you can pay them
like
to take
force a trade, right?
Yeah, which I think is really cool, and the way that wild cards especially play into that is really interesting. I'm fine with never ever playing it ever again.
All right, I didn't expect this, but I might be fighting a little bit for Longboard here. I rank it as C tier. I think it's definitely better than all those D tier.
Okay.
That D tier stuff down there. And I think there are some people who really like this game. Like you said, it's almost multiplayer Lost Cities, but with forced trades and open hands and that kind of thing, which is really cool in a lot of ways. The thing that kind of rubs me a little bit wrong about it, I don't know why, it's the gold cards actually. I got the promo pack. Maybe it's the promo pack that does it, because there's like some of those I'm like, what is this even saying? Like, I don't even know what this goal is asking me to do or accomplish. And so there's some gray area there that kind of rub me wrong. And then for some reason, I don't know, I feel like it maybe detracts. I could be wrong here. It maybe detracts from the pure fun of the game. But in any case, and I should try it without the gold cards, honestly. I wonder if when Reiner originally designed the game, it didn't have those. I wouldn't be surprised at all if that was the case. Because I think this one was in development for a long time. But I think it's a solid little game where the forced trades are a lot of fun, and deciding which colors you're going to compete on and gun for is cool. Maybe if it was a little bit shorter and a little bit cleaner, I would rank it even higher. But I think C tier is a good spot for it.
No, that's fair. If I saw it in someone's collection, I'd be like, oh, okay. Matt, I like that you like this. So
yeah. All right. Loot. Oh boy, this is D tier for me. D tier loot. I've only played this once, but I had a pretty, poor impression of it from that one play. To me, this game is very old. I think it's as old as I am, so like over 30 years. And I think it shows, because the issue that I had was you're drawing either ship cards to bid on other people's ships and try to be the highest bidder to earn it when it comes back around to you. It's kind of like Great Wall of China in that way. I think you're trying to remain the highest bidder until your next turn. But also you might draw more ship cards into your hand from the deck. And if that happens to be the case, like with me, then you're just like miserable, because I just kept drawing ship cards. Every time I'm like, man, I really need more bidding cards so that I can get in on these auctions here that my opponents are claiming. I kept drawing ship cards. And then on top of that, if you leave the ship cards in your hand, then they're negative points. Oh, no. And so I keep drawing these cards. I'm like, okay, I have to get rid of this, but I don't have any cards to bid with. And to even claim these ones that I put in front of me, I'm just putting them out for other people to start claiming. And man, it was just kind of a miserable experience, honestly. But I'm ranking it above F tier just because there is a team-based mode that sounds like it's the way to play it. And I've heard a little bit here and there of people saying that's how they love to play it the most, the team-based mode. So I want to give it another shot, but it might take a while for me to come around to it, because it wasn't a great first impression.
No, I'm there basically 100%. Like it's very close to F tier for me. But,
all right.
Oh, speaking of D tier, Looting London.
Oh, okay.
Very strained game of very slowly building up sets of cards in your hand to claim or destroy tiles of 5 different colors. One of the colors isn't going to score at the end of the game, and you're not quite sure which until things play out and you're like, oh, this color probably isn't going to score. It was a bit too slow, a bit too ponderous, and like the theme it's about being basically Sherlock Holmes and trying to solve these 5 cases, but you're just
Sherlock Holmes?
Sherlock Holmes, which is actually there was a French writer who had like this gentleman thief, and he wanted him to square off against Sherlock Holmes. But oh my gosh, how am I blanking on the writer of Sherlock Holmes, Arthur Conan Doyle, was like, no. And so this French writer made Sherlock Holmes, and he was just this bumbling English detective that his gentleman thief ran circles around. Hilarious.
Interesting.
I have a friend who's very much obsessed with Sherlock Holmes, and I've learned so much about him, and I'm so grateful for it. In this game, you are not Sherlock Holmes. You are Sherlock Holmes, or you are literally just thieves that are looting London, not trying to solve crimes. It's completely nonsensical. It has potential. It has potential. But in its current state, that's all that it has.
Fair enough. All right.
Lord of the Rings.
Lord of the Rings. Well, man, I don't feel good about being the one doing this because I might have people coming after me. I know this has some very passionate fans, but to me, this is a D tier, Knizia. And it's one that I respect a lot because it kicked off the cooperative genre. It is quite thematic in the theme of working together to resist the dark forces and try against all odds, try to overcome them. I think Reiner did some really, really cool stuff, innovative stuff, to cook up this game, honestly. But my issue with it is that there are similar style of games like this one. You're progressing through a line of events, right? And you're planning ahead for some things that are coming up, that kind of thing. But I think Beowulf does that experience better in pretty much every conceivable way as far as planning ahead, deciding how much to invest now versus later. I think you have more freedom and more interesting decisions with Beowulf. And then just the general cooperative experience of like, okay, this player takes a turn and then a bad thing happens. This player takes a turn and a bad thing happens is pretty much the template that Pandemic used. And I think this inspired Pandemic in some ways, I'd have to imagine. So, but I do think Pandemic does it better. It's just cleaner. It's probably better balanced and a little bit more strategy while still being streamlined. Way more streamlined, honestly. Like this game is kind of a pain to learn.
Not at all.
Yeah.
This is very much like, if people think Reiner Knizia, all he does is math. No. He does math with complicated rules sometimes. Like,
yeah, and it's a pain to learn and teach, and it shows its age. Like, yeah. So it's D tier. I appreciate it for what it did for the industry, but it's not one I want to play again.
How many players did you play it with?
Just 2 players.
Okay. So I played with 4, and I think it's at least mid C tier. I think I have it at B. I'd very much like to try the incredibly out of print expansions because I'm a English major, big Lord of the Rings fan. I reread the books earlier this year, and like the feeling of like just a spark of hope in the face of cruelty and like an uncaring world. Like the board game nails it.
Yeah, that is cool.
I think the cooperative aspect, when you have more players, it very much comes more to the fore. That I don't think you would get with fewer players than that. I think it's very much like high C, low B for me. And
yeah, I just realized you're kind of ordering these with intention. So I'm gonna say that Foodie Force needs to be way higher up on the C tier list. That one, you could talk me into B tier if you were able. So, but yeah sorry.
Yeah,
that's fair. I think Lord of the Rings in C tier is totally fair.
All right, solid. Lord of the Rings: The Confrontation, though, for me, there's no question that this is S tier.
Wow,
it's so fast, it's so slick, but like the depth of the systems are just like mind-boggling for me. I think probably this is my bias for simplicity coming through, but there's also the bias for the thematic tension. When you are like either side, you feel like you don't have control. When you're the Fellowship, you're like, man, like Frodo could just get murked at any moment. I don't want to reveal him. He can run away really easily. And you're just trying to like draw Sauron's power out and have it overextend himself. And when you're Sauron, you're just like, where the crap is that stupid hobbit? Like, that's all I need to find, and it's impossible to know where he is without like decimating half my army against stupid Aragorn. And I just think it's so rich and so like just so solid.
It's like better Stratego, right?
It's better
in every way. Yeah, and this, I had this at A tier, so I'm like pretty close there with you. I think this one in some ways overwhelms me a bit at the beginning, because you're like, where do I position my characters, and like, who do I move first, and like everything feels like a bad decision or a wrong decision, but you don't really have any reason for it. You're just like, who am I going to send off to die? Because I feel like whoever I'm moving first is going to die, you know? Yeah, and you don't really you don't have much direction early in the game, which is intimidating a bit in some ways to me early in the game. But later on, yeah, you can make some really clever plays. And I don't have many plays of this, so I will happily defer to you and leave it at S tier here, because I know it has tons of fans. I think this is one I actually asked Reiner about, or his team at least, and they said they don't even own the rights to this design anymore. I think they sold it. So yeah, I guess if a publisher is looking to reprint this, you got to talk to Reiner and track down whoever currently owns the rights, which it could be, Middle Earth, whatever their corporation's called, the
Tolkien Estate.
The Tolkien Estate. Yeah, maybe they own the rights to it, or maybe it's another publisher who, like Fantasy Flight, who currently still owns the rights, but should still be in print. Honestly, it's a very strong 2-player game.
Oh, it's so good. Oh, speaking of strong 2-player games, we got the Lost Cities here.
Wow, the Lost Cities line. We got a lot of these. Okay, let's just throw all these out at once, and then we'll hash it out a bit. Do you want to do that?
Yep.
Okay, so Lost Cities, A tier. Lost Cities Rivals, D tier. Yeah, the whole spectrum. Lost Cities Roll and Write and the board game, I put C tier, solid C tier. Okay, so here's my take. The original's still the best. That 2-player back and forth of like, Reiner does something so well that very few designers I've ever seen do well, or maybe they've tried to replicate it, but he's kind of the one who started this. Lost Cities is a game about not wanting to play anything from your hand ever. Because if you play it too early, then maybe you're taking too big of a leap towards an expedition commitment, and you're denying yourself the opportunity to play lower cards and rack up your points more. But if you discard it too early, you might be just handing it over to your opponent who would graciously eat it up, but you have to play something. Just a great game of hand management tension, and a really, really good couples game. I think one of our favorites between my wife and I. So that is Lost Cities, the original game. Which of these others have you played?
Just the board game.
Okay. Yeah, what are your thoughts on Lost Cities and the board game then?
For me, Lost Cities is S tier. I'm very much Lost Cities pilled. So I'm like at least like tip top of the A tier, because I've played this at least 24 times, probably closer to 36. I had like a friend that I would play this with, like usually like every Sunday, and then like a girlfriend for a while, and we play every Sunday, and I just like, I love it. I love the tension where it's just like, I don't want to do anything, but I have to, and it's so painful. But when you make those big bets and those, like, those clever plays where it's like, oh, I'll put down this card because I think we'll both want it, but then I'll bury it with another color that I know that they don't want, so that I can hold on to it for later. And there's so many clever ways to do stuff with the cards, and I love it. I love Lost Cities. Lost Cities, the board game, is good.
Yeah. It's good.
But I think it's just like, it just feels a bit bloated in comparison.
And long. Yeah, it's a long experience. But it's a really good family game.
Yeah. Yeah, I can see that.
Okay, so then we have Rivals and the Roll and Write. So Rivals, for me, it's kind of like it's an auction game, but it doesn't have that same Lost Cities core ingredient of when you invest in an expedition, you start out way in the red. And so there's none of that risk. It's like anything you earn in front of you is going to count as points. And the only risk you're taking is like, if you start with a high value card in a suit, then you can't play the lower one. So that kind of stinks a little bit, but you still get positive points. But to me, it's just like, nothing about it was really interesting. I'd much prefer to play any other Knizia auction game. And if I want Lost Cities, I'd rather play the card game or even the board game or even the Roll and Write. Honestly, it's the worst of the bunch for me, just because it doesn't really do anything exceptionally well. And it takes out one of the core elements that I really love about Lost Cities. The roll and write, I think, is surprisingly good. It really manages to keep that core feeling of Lost Cities really nicely, of like, oh, I need to get up these tracks if I start into them, because otherwise I'm getting negative points. And then it has the dice drafting of like Shot and Totten. No, not Shot. Ganz Clever. All these shots, but Ganz Clever, where you pick some dice for yourself and then you leave out the rest for somebody else to use. And so there's a little bit of interaction there. And I think it's great. Yeah, it's a good little game. Well, I guess it's good, not great, right? But again, we don't love roll and writes that much, so C tier. Okay.
Marshmallow Test.
Marshmallow Test. You played this?
Nope.
Oh, Marshmallow Test. I'd say it's very similar to Foodie Forest. I'd put it fairly close to it, honestly. It's another very clever trick taking game. Where you don't want to be the first person to win 3 tricks, because once you win 3 tricks, you're out of the round. But you don't want to be the last person, because if you're the last person, then you don't get any points. The reason being, when you go out of the round, you've won 3 tricks. You look at how many tricks have everybody else won, and you score that many points. And so you want to be like the second to last person to win tricks, because then you're scoring as many points as all the other tricks that people have won as they go out of the round. And it's a game of delayed gratification. That's why it's called Marshmallow Test. So very cool, solid trick taking game with a nice twist. Highly recommend if anyone ever gets to play it. I think it's a great time.
Solid. We've got the Medicis.
Medici.
All right. So Medici for me is an S tier. I don't play it as much as I want to. But just the sheer strength and like simplicity of the design is such that I can't really conceive of it being any lower than that, because it does so much with so little. And when you get 6 people together for an auction game, that any other like 6-player auction game other than like Karate Tamati could drag. It could like maybe not work. People could like not get with it. But like Medici is just like, it's so sharp. It's so sharp and cut. Yeah.
Yeah. This is the game where I put a target on my back, because I have it at C tier. C tier for me. The reason being, I think and I've played it enough times that like I don't love it the more I play it, so that's not a good sign. For me, it's 3 things. It's too vanilla, it's too long, and it's too mathy. Those are the 3 main things. The thing I love about this Medici line in general is deciding, do I go hard and try to monopolize a certain good, or do I try to make the most valuable ship? And it's very hard to do both. And there's trade-offs all along the way. But I feel like if I'm looking for an auction game, this one, again, is just too mathy, too vanilla, and too long for me to really appreciate. But I can see that it's just like, in a lot of ways, a very perfect design. Like, just as you say, like it's so clean. It's so pure. Like there's nothing you should take from it or put into it as far as its own board game goes. But I don't love it. I played it at 6 players very recently, and at the end I was like, it's still, there are other auction games I'd much rather play. So
okay,
yeah,
you know what?
So I think somewhere in between those two is where it should go. Although some people are going to hate me for dragging it down so much.
I think I'm okay with putting it in B for board game.
For board game,
because it is something where it's like, maybe I just haven't played it out yet. Like all my plays with it have been so good, but maybe it does have like a limited half-life that I haven't encountered yet.
Yeah, and this is probably where I get even more ire, because I rank Medici the card game higher. I mean, I put it at B tier personally, but higher than Medici itself, because to me the auctions of Medici are the least interesting part. I much prefer auction games that have more twists or I don't know, more interesting stuff going on. Whereas Medici the card game maintains that core element I talked about, monopolies versus a valuable ship, but then it enhances the push your luck aspect of like, how many cards do I reveal from the deck, and when do I just stop and commit to what's there and take some cards and be done? And it's a lot simpler, it's a lot faster, and it's one that I found still needed a good high number for, just like Medici. I don't think people like to play Medici much at lower counts. The same, I think, can be said for Medici, the card game, where it's probably best at like 5 players at its highest count. But that's me.
Yeah, I think I'll let you do that. Have the target on your back, because there's a part of me that does say, no, he's right. No, listen to him. And I'm just like, ooh, I don't think I'm ready to have a target on my back yet. So like, oh yeah, this is all Nick right here.
Yep, I will. The dice game, I had it C tier.
For me, that's a solid C tier. I've enjoyed my time with it. You can play it in 10 minutes, and Solo. It has like all the, and like with people too. Like I think I banged out a game of this in like 15 minutes with 3 people. Really enjoyed it. It's not going to blow your socks off, but like I really like having it around. Yeah,
it's surprisingly good. Is it even better than Lost Cities, the dice game, though? Maybe it is. I don't know. I think they're good next to each other, though, for sure, at least. But it does have a solo mode that's surprisingly good, so probably higher.
Okay. Medici versus Strozzi. This is just me, right?
Yep, all you.
Oh, man, this one's hard because there's 2 ways. There's C tier of I'm probably never going to play this again. But there's B tier of holy crap, this game was so sharp and dangerous. I think personally I put it in C, even though I think
that sounds safe.
Like 8.75 or something.
Because
it is literally zero sum, the game. It's a 2-player only version. You got set collection. It is cruel and horrendous in a way that if someone was like, my favorite Knizia game is Medici versus Strozzi, I'd be like, listen, I'm afraid of you now.
Yeah. Oh man. Yeah, it's one I really want to try it, but I probably will end up in the same boat of like, I probably can't play this anymore.
I want to see 2 accountants play this game because holy crap.
Oh man.
All right.
What do we got next?
Merchants of Amsterdam. This is just me, right?
Just you again. Yep. I own this in shrink. Well, no, I think I opened it. And I was like, oh, I don't want to learn this right now.
I'm going to throw it into C tier. The first half of my play of this was interesting. The second half of my play of this was quite good. Trying to figure out the value of things is kind of impossible. And I want a version of this game that is simpler and faster, and it just looks better. This is from like 1999 or 2000.
It's pretty old,
old. But there's something there. There's some potential there that I would.
Well, the unique thing is like the Dutch auction, right? Why don't you explain that for like 15 seconds?
Oh yeah. So every round, each person draws 3 cards one after another. They choose to keep one for themselves. They choose to throw one away. They choose one to auction. And then you start this big old clock. It starts at $200. And it ratchets down very loudly in increments of 10 until someone is like, okay, I'll take it for 110. I'll take it for 70.
And they kind of slap the clock and stop it, right?
Clock, and it's
nice.
It's a fun thing that also just doesn't work all the time.
Yeah,
it's a really cool system that I would love to see Reiner revisit. You could do it with a deck of cards too, where someone's just like going one at a time until someone's like, I'll take it. It's mine. Wait a second.
Yeah.
It's mine. It's mine actually here? Anyways.
Super ugly game too. Yeah, I think it could use an update because it sounds really interesting.
Yep. Ooh. Speaking of the opposite though.
Ooh.
Mille Fiori. Where's this going?
Sweet glass making. I'm putting it in S tier, baby. S tier. You gotta throw that expansion up there too, because that's what puts it in S tier for me. Yeah, so Mille Fiori is a simultaneous drafting game. Think of something like Seven Wonders, where you pick a card and then you pass your hand, and you pick a card and pass your hand. But you take turns revealing your card, and your card is tied to a space on the board where you place one of your acrylic clear tiles. And I think that was the premise of this game. Reiner wanted to make a game where you could place out clear tiles that showed your color, but still showed the feature underneath. And what he did with that, he just wrote it into the sunset. He crushed it. This to me this is a point salad game that I actually really obviously really love. Usually point salad games to me feel like, well, this will get me 6 points and this will get me 7 points. And if doing this will get me 5 points. So I'll do the 7-point action and, whoopee. But this one has teeth. It's very interactive. It can be very mean.
Oh, yeah.
And the expansion pushes it up even further for me, because I think one of my main holdups with the original game, even though I loved it, is that turn order just changes clockwise each round, and turn order is a huge advantage in this game. And sometimes, if you're the one who gets to play a card first in a round when you have a full hand of 5 cards and claim a spot that can pop off all these combos, and
2 points and 2 extra
yeah,
you're like,
yeah, and you're like, oh, so you just got that because you were first player this round, like. All right. Okay. I mean, yeah. And you can have your own combos that are very, very satisfying. It's a very combo-tastic, satisfying game. But the expansion introduces the Doge card. And the Doge card is something that gets passed around in hands as well. And when you choose a Doge card and you play it, then you claim the first player marker and you keep it until somebody else plays the Doge card. And now it's like it suddenly feels earned that you get to be first. And then it adds in other considerations that apparently bother some Knizia fans because they like it more pure and simple. But for me, I think the expansion is fantastic. And I think for a lot of gamers, especially, it raises it to like a medium weight Euro with a lot of satisfying turns and combos to be had. So it's S tier for me.
Yeah. Mille Fiori for me was high A tier, and that's only because I'm like, I haven't played it enough to really justify S tier, but like I'm more than happy to have it there, because I love when you play a card and then it just cascades because you're like so smart. You're just like, Reiner's in his combo era, and I am.
He is. Yeah. I imagine he designed these kind of next to each other. I think Cascadero he started designing at the beginning of the pandemic, so it's very possible they were kind of cooked up around the same time, where he's like, how about them combos? So, all right.
Minotaur Lords. Have you played Ghost and Scarab Lords?
Nope. I played the similar Blue Moon that we already talked about, Blue Moon Legends, but not these ones.
All right, we have where is it? There it is. I think for me, these are solid C tier. They do a lot of interesting things with the decks that they have and the different ways that they're constructed. I think it's more immediate than Blue Moon, and if you like it more than Blue Moon, more power to you, Robert. But I just didn't quite get the same amount of. I don't know, just didn't get the same quite amount of enjoyment. I think Scarab Lords has same problem as Blue Moon, some objectifying art that's very dated. I think the decks in Minotaur Lords are slightly more interesting than Scarab Lords, but I don't know. Like if someone was like, hey, we're going to play Scarab Lords and Minotaur Lords until we die, I'm like, I'd be more than happy to do that. Like, I think there's a lot of depth to these
Pretty
games.
solid.
I think they're
Cool.
really interesting.
Yeah. So yeah, and that's the impression I've got. I haven't played these, but reading all about them, most people say just play Blue Moon instead, unless you're Robert. So I just haven't played them. Yeah, we love them. Yeah.
Okay.
All right, modern art. Oh, okay. For me, this is an A tier game, and this is one of the first actually Knizia games that I ever played. And loved it when I got into it, because there's a variety of auctions. It almost feels like a pseudo party game or a pseudo role-playing game where you're putting these paintings up for auction and trying to convince people to bid high for them, because you will get paid whatever they bid unless you buy it yourself. And the variety of auctions and the cleverness of like these paintings are only as valuable as however many are played out relative to each other, just so thematic, so brilliant, such a genius game in so many ways. But I think it maybe it would have been S tier for me a couple of years ago, but I think other auction games have passed it a little bit, because I do think it's susceptible to some people just like bidding way too high for a painting, and so then they're paying some other player just way too many points, because your money is your points at the end. And so like that kind of like irks me a little bit, but I still have a blast with it, so it's A tier for me.
Yeah, I think I'm with you. I haven't played modern art in a while, so it's not fresh. And maybe if I had more recently, I'd be like, no. S tier. I think I think this is one of the strongest marriages of theme and mechanics in Reiner Knizia's entire catalog, maybe
Definitely.
the strongest. I think it has like bite as satire, and I think it's wonderful. So
yeah, definitely one that should be on everybody's bucket list, I would say. Even if it's on A tier, it's a bucket list game.
Yeah. Yep.
And one that I'm happy to play anytime. So
speaking of,
but that leads us to the next one.
Non-bucket list games. I'm gonna guess this is going right here for you. Is that right? Or
I had a low D tier. Yeah. I didn't think it was horrible, but not good.
That's where I'm at. I think the set collection is interesting, but like with the amount of cards that you get and the amount of plays that you get per round, it doesn't feel like you have very much agency over what cards are played. You know, if someone is like, this is my favorite Reiner Knizia game, I would question it. But they could convince me that it was a B, but I could get any.
Right. Yeah. I mean, the heart of modern art, I feel, is the auctions, right? And there are no auctions in this game. Which I guess if you hate auctions, maybe this is the one for you. And you know, I played this a long time ago, and so I may be more forgiving to it now, and maybe more appreciative of what it does offer. But at the time I played it, I was like, why would I ever play this over modern art? And so that's where I landed on it.
I like auctions. I like modern arts auctions. So if you take that away, so
there it stays. Money. Speaking of auctions, you played Money, right?
I have.
This game is probably on the higher end of the C tier currently for me, but I could see it going even higher. Very interesting auction filler game where you just every round you lay out, you know, one row of cards, one, I guess, you know, opportunity to snatch up some cards and another 4 cards on the other side. And so you can bid to take those in the middle, and you choose a bunch of cards in your hand, or a few, or one, whatever. And you all simultaneously reveal what you're bidding. And then the highest bidder can take either something from the middle, or they can take somebody else's bid. And you're basically, much like Cat Blues, you're trying to construct a better hand of cards by bidding for what you currently have in your hand and assemble these currencies. And I think it's really cool. The first time I played it, I was like, it's pretty good. The second time I played it, I liked it more, and that's where I've stopped on it so far. So I could see it growing for me.
Yeah, I think for me, it's one that's kind of actually withering just a little bit. I'm just like, it's interesting.
Yeah.
But the comparison to Cat Blues, I think, is like, oh, maybe that's it. It feels a little static. I think it's really interesting being able to be like, oh, actually, I'm going to take your bid as my lot.
Yeah.
Here's these cards.
Yeah, I like that.
I think it's really cool. I'm planning on playing this again sometime in the next couple weeks and deciding if I want to keep my copy of it. So.
Yeah, I think there can be some plays of this where it's not super impressive, and other plays where you have more fun with it. So maybe it's group dependent. I don't know, but that's kind of been my experience with it so far, and I'm keen to try it more though. So, oh baby. Yes, indeed.
This is like top S tier for me. I love Municipium, and you know, if you wanna hear all of my thoughts about this, I wrote a lengthy review about why the production was so terrible. You can find that on Board Game Geek. It's Municipium, what did I call it? Like a hidden gem that's worth repolishing or something like that.
Yeah. I read that. It was a great review.
I think it is like so tight and so in need of like a reprint. Like it begs for new life. look at that face. Like,
it's just yeah, that is a very bleeding face, isn't it? So this is one that I had no idea of. I was pretty deep into Knizia games at this point in my hobbyist career, but had no clue that it even existed. And then you put it on my radar. You mentioned it to me when we were playing another game on TTS once, and I was like, all right. I mean, you really love this game. I'll give it a shot, you know? And I was skeptical, right? Because it just, when you never hear of a game like this and it has kind of a lukewarm rating, you're like, all right, maybe it's good. And then I played it and I was like, oh my goodness, this game is amazing. So I am right there with you. I had it at high A tier, but only because of the production issues.
Oh yeah.
So maybe, I mean, I hate to tell people like, go out and pick this up, because I do feel like it's one that is likely among Reiner's hidden gems. It's likely to get a new version, either from us or from somebody else. Like, because I like it so much. Any of these high tier games, I'd say are all fair game for us to republish or for another publisher to like hear us raving about it and maybe take a look and maybe love it as much as we do, and then from there, boom, it's getting a new version, right? So, yeah, I'd say low S tier or high A tier. You could talk me into very easily. So,
I'm gonna put it above. I'm just gonna put it mid S tier. I won't do anything else.
Did we even describe the game? I mean, it's an area control game. Like,
it's an area control game where area majority is rewarded in 3 different ways. And so what you're trying to do is you're trying to collect sets of meeples. You can get those by just having the most of a person when a certain number of meeples come to location, or when a roving centurion token comes to location, or when you use like the location's ability to like put more meeples on the board, or to, trade them in or something like that. I think it's wonderful because like you move people around and then you either take a card from the deck or use one of your 3 cards that you know exactly what they're going to do. But regardless of what happens, like the card that is flipped or played is going to say, hey, who's got majority in this location or in these locations or in all the locations, and you get something because of it. And if it was like, if you got different things with other ways of like board presence, then it would be annoying. But because majority is always rewarded in some way, I think it brings the whole thing together.
It makes me think of like El Grande, but flipped on its head, or like a more fluid version of El Grande, where yeah, majorities change and you're chasing different bonuses at different times on this very simple circular board. And my goodness, I have a lot of plays of this and I've loved every play of it. I think it's definitely one of his strongest hidden gem games in his entire collection. So
it's so good. Oh, speaking of not a hidden gem though, My City.
Indeed. I think this is one that we throw up very close to Municipium. I put it at S tier. This to me, I've said it many times on our website. If you follow our blog or my podcast at all, we've probably raved about My City more than any other game, but that's because it's just so many good in so many different categories. It's a fantastic family game. It's the best polyomino game I've ever played, and it's my favorite legacy game I've ever played. And legacy games are usually known for their narrative, their stories, their plot twists, things like that. That's not what this game is. So don't set your expectations wrong. But this one is just Reiner taking the core essence of what makes polyominoes fun and then riffing on it for 24 different sets of rules, or 24, like an evolving set of rules even, and competitive. You're opening envelopes and you're discovering new things and you're like, oh my goodness, what has he done to us now? And I don't know. I had a blast with this. This was probably landed the best between my wife and I, like the best couples game we've ever had in how easy it was to get to the table and how addicted we were to it and how quickly we played through it over time. So, yeah, I mean, can't say enough good things. I honestly don't really play it anymore because a huge part of the appeal for me was the legacy element, but a lot of people love the eternal mode. But for me, there are other spin-offs of this that keep me coming back and enjoying that similar premise.
Yep. My campaign of this stalled when my third player moved away, but she's going to be moving back soon, and I'm really looking forward to wrapping it up. But I agree.
Yes.
I think it's sharp. I think it's Reiner. Like, it's basically like getting to see how Reiner like kind of designs games and the way that he iterates. Yeah. It's like it's kind of a crash course, like a master course in game design, I think, honestly.
And I even came into this game like a little bit apprehensive, like not super pumped, because I knew it was kind of bland looking and it wasn't very interactive. And that alone had me like, well, I mean, maybe it's okay. I wasn't expecting an S tier or even an A tier experience out of this box, and that's what it gave me. Cool. So
it's beautiful. Okay, the spinoffs, My City Roll and Build. Where are you putting that?
My City Roll and Build, I have it at A tier. This is the other one that I mentioned a long time ago. Although, let's see, we have Cascadero. Oh, it better be B tier because I don't think it's better than those. Yeah, high B tier. Roll and writes again aren't my favorite genre, but My City Roll and Build, much like Cascadito, brings out the fun of roll and writing, because there are 12 different sheets you progress through, and they change up the rules, and it's still a very tight, tense, and exciting spatial puzzle, even though it's not very interactive. So for me, I was very impressed. I don't think it's necessarily better than My City, but I think it's very worthwhile. And maybe especially if you have a little bit of distance between playing both games. So because some of the early episodes hit the same beats as My City. So starting out, it's not as impressive, but once you get deeper into it, it's really fun. So
okay. And then My Island.
My Island, let's put it in A tier. I think My City, when it first came out, it had a new, refreshing shock factor to what Reiner was doing with legacy games in a very approachable way. We tried some other legacy games and just burnt out on them because there's too much setup eventually. There's too much to keep track of. But these games are also clean, and that was his goal with this series, was to make a game that was approachable and family friendly in the legacy genre, and he absolutely nails it. My Island changes out the polyomino square tiles with hexagonal shapes, and it's a very good game. But I think I'm like 50 plays into the system now, so I'm not as like star-eyed as I used to be, and I think that's the main thing that hurts it. But I don't think it's necessarily better or worse than My City. I just think I think I slightly prefer the polyomino shapes to the hexagonal shapes fundamentally, and that's why it's not quite as high. But still a great game, definitely worth getting into if you enjoyed My City or My City Roll and Build.
Okay. Next we have Ninja Master. Ninja Master, I think, is like it's going to be kind of mid B for me. I think it's fun, it's dumb, it's quick. It's not going to be everybody's cup of tea because it is very much like a speed game. And if you have a hard time adding things up, you're going to struggle. And I struggle with this game a bit with some of the people that I've played, but it's hilarious. This is one of the few games in the last couple of years that I've played like 6 times in a row with this because they just keep doing it over and over again. And I think it's great.
Yeah, I think Tom Vassell reviewed this recently, and he like hated it. He's like, "There's no game here, and this is terrible." And I was like, "What are you talking about? Like, that's not even close to the experience I've had." And I get it. I think there is a range of folks who will be like, "What is this game?" Or if you don't like speed games, definitely avoid it. But to me, Reiner takes. I think he looked at the mechanism and he's like, how do we make this more interesting? How do we make this more clever? And that's what he does. This is a B tier game for me as well. Very cool to see, like, okay, you might be the fastest to snatch up a pink token, but just because you're the fastest doesn't mean that was the right idea, because that pink ninja might be negative because you weren't taking your time to see if it was negative from the dice roll, right? Oh, yeah. And I have a blast with this every time. I agree. It's a solid B tier game. Definitely worth playing if you're looking for a chaotic filler.
Okay. Oh, No Mercy. This is all you. The next 2 are all you.
Okay, No Mercy is just like Family Inc., just like Cheeky Monkey. Very similar game with very much a lot of shared DNA. To me, this is a high C tier game. I know a lot of Knizia files in the enthusiast Discord love this game. This is like their go-to filler. So I think a lot of this has the potential to be like one that folks love to play, but it's also just so stinking lucky. The virtue is No Mercy is the smallest box, the smallest package of all 3 of these games. So that's a point in its favor. It's the most streamlined and simple of the bunch. That's another point in its favor. And it's just a deck of cards. So easy to set up and get into. This is one where you decide, you keep flipping cards until you decide to stop or you bust. And if you flip a card that's in front of other people before they've turned it face down to score, then you can steal that. But if you flip a card that's already in front of you with the ones that you flipped face up, then you bust and you lose those cards. And that's pretty much the game. So very much a luck fest, but in a fun, slap happy way. So one that I'll happily play, but it's maybe not as flexible or adjustable as Cheeky Monkey is, which has a little area or a majority competition to it as well, which is kind of interesting, and kid-friendly rules and stuff. So a little bit lower for me than Cheeky Monkey, but not much.
Okay. Odd Socks.
Odd Socks. Why don't we slap that right next to the Trick Takers? Because that's basically, these are all really good card games. Highly recommend it. If you get the chance to play these, like, I love all these games, but they're not ones that I'm dying to get to the table over and over again. This one reminds me a little bit of I want to say Hot Lead, but I'm like failing to remember all the mechanisms behind it. But essentially, you're trying to balance out. If you earn red socks, then you want to earn blue socks because they cancel each other out, and you don't want too many of one or the other. And I don't know, it's a clever card game. Definitely recommend it. That's the new Japanese version, Odd Socks. The older version is Relationship Tightrope, which I think rubs a lot of people the wrong way these days for its, kind of its brazen theme. But Odd Socks is great. So solid.
Ohio. For me, this is a solid like D tier. This should just be a deck of cards game, and in that context, it's fine. It's enjoyable. Mm-hmm. It's really simple, really easy to teach, but just the worst box art, worse than Municipium, and Municipium is like very like high there for worst. But it's just like a completely nonsensical theme for what is an abstract like 52 card deck game. It's fine. Mm-hmm. It's decent.
Nice. Ohio. Orongo. This is a very, like Municipium, it's a very, very good sleeper hit. Very good hidden gem. I put it high A tier personally.
I'm gonna put low S tier to split the difference.
I can live with that. Honestly, I'm fine with that. The only reason I knocked it down is because in its current form, kind of like Municipium, it's not the best production, and it knocks it down a bit. But it's so good. Why don't you take it away and explain why?
Orongo is a simultaneous closed auction bid networking game. Each turn, 2 new resources come out, and then you bid a secret amount of stones. Whoever bid the first is the only person to pay their bid, but they get to place 3 markers down anywhere on the board that they want, and they're trying to connect these sets of resources to spaces on the coast so that they can build Maui, the big old Easter Island heads. And it's just a race to build a certain number of them. But what makes it super spicy is that the second and third and maybe fourth place people don't pay their bid, but they get to place 2 and then 1 and 1. But if you don't bid anything, you take all the stones that were bid in previous rounds, and if multiple people bid 0, then you split them. So it's very much trying to get like a corner on the market and then like eke the stones out as little as you can to keep other people from having bidding power, while also like having enough bidding power to get the spaces that you really need to connect your network, to connect resources, or get to the coast to actually have spaces to build your statues. And it's just like, it's clean, it's fast, it plays fantastic at 2, 3, or 4, and like it's so good. It's so good.
Yeah, Orongo, man. I have so many good things I could say about it, but I think I just want to say 2. So it is a race game. It is not a game like some of these other ones that are a little bit more dull or overdone, where you're just bidding to try to earn points, right? This is a racing game where you're trying to put out all your Moai statues first. And it's very cutthroat in that you can try to block other people off and slow them down and that kind of thing. And I love that it's quick enough that even though it's a very mean game, it can be, it's not too punishing because it's a fairly quick game. But the other thing is, Reiner Knizia, in my opinion, is the best designer in particularly 2 genres, probably more, but tile placement and auctions, right? And this is tile placement combined with auctions into one beautiful, wonderful, just thrilling experience that the only reason it's not as popular as these other games we're ranking high is I think the production kind of bungled a few things out of the gates. I think the publisher didn't really have a lot of passion. Just from the way they introduced it and the way that they produced it, it seems like whoever was in charge of this design wasn't super passionate about it, and it shows. And it hurt the game, and it didn't get the momentum it needed out of the gates when it released. And so it absolutely deserves a new edition, and I think it's going to get it. So I would say if you're like, oh, I got to try this game, I'd say wait 2 years, because I do think I asked Reiner if the rights were available to this, and he said they are not, which means a publisher probably has the rights, and they're probably going to put out a new edition soon, and it better be better, because even Reiner agrees, like, the production is what hurt this game, and it deserves a bigger audience. It deserves to be recognized as one of his best.
And on the flip side of that coin, I say, don't wait 2 years. Life's play
yeah, true. That's fair. That's fair. Yeah, I guess if you're a patient one, then wait. If you want to try it, then yeah, I mean, no shame in picking up this version, because it's still very playable. It's just not as good as it could have been.
Yep.
Yeah.
Palazzo. Ooh, Palazzo.
Oh, yeah.
Very high B tier, bordering on A tier.
I totally agree.
It's an auction game where you're trying to build palaces, but the way that you build has to be ascending. There's only 5 levels, and restructuring your palace is super restricting. Has kind of Taj Mahal like bidding, but you don't have to pay your bid if you don't win. It's just really good. It comes in a small box.
So good.
I really like the art design. A lot of people seem to think that this game is ugly, but I love the colors that it chooses.
It's very humble production, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it's there's a pleasantry to it, the whole table presence. But I think because it's just so plain and it looks like any other Euro from that time period, like literally it's so interchangeable that's kind of what makes it fade into obscurity. This is one I'd love to see a new version of that makes it pop more, even though like you say, it's a very pleasant production and pleasant art style. But my goodness, I wasn't expecting much from this game, and I was like, man, this game is solid. It just fires on all cylinders as an experience. It's very quick, very sharp auctioning game, and really cool decisions that you can make with some teeth to it. If you start into a building and you build one of them, and then the game ends because it sneaks up on you like it does in Ethnos or something, then then you're gonna be regretting it. You lose 5 points. So good. Yeah, high B tier for me too.
Yeah. The best part about the game though is like the 5 tiles that come out to end the game, they make a little picture. Like, how come nobody does that? It's adorable. Like, it's so wonderful.
That is, yeah. A lot of cool stuff they did with that game. I wish it does deserve more love than I think it's gotten. So,
all right. These next six are just.
Oh wow. All right, let's blitz through this then.
Okay.
So, Penguin Party. I wish I had more plays left with adults because I've only played it with my wife and daughter, but I actually quite like it. It's a C tier, solid C tier game. It's very simple. If you like llama and you appreciate llama, I think you should try this game. Absolutely. And you can pick it up from Tanuki Games. Shout out to Tanuki Games. They are a retailer based in Texas, but you can shop online, and they bring in a lot of stuff from overseas. And this edition from Japan is beautiful. But it's a game where you're building a pyramid. You're playing out cards to build a pyramid of penguins. You're trying to get rid of your whole hand, and you can only play a color on top of a matching color. So there are ways to cut off other people's colors when I only have 1 pink card in my whole hand. So I'm just going to keep stacking blue on top of pink, or other colors on top of these. And so it can be kind of mean, but it's very simple and streamlined. Good family game. I really like it.
Okay. The Pick-a-Pen games.
Pick-a-Pen games. These are roll and writes with a big twist that the dice are actually the pencils are actually the dice are the pencils. So the pencils have different symbols on each side, and you roll them all. And these pencils, I credit to the publisher. These pencils are chunky. They're thick. They're dense. They're very satisfying to roll. And you roll them, and then you take turns drafting a pencil and filling in that color and the symbol that was rolled or whatever effect it has onto your sheet. And so that's a cool, neat little trick that Reiner did with this game. And it newly released this year. I had to import this from overseas though. But it's very much a low. Oh, where is Pick-a-Pen? Low C tier for me, I think. Oh no, it's D tier. Sorry. Oh, it's high D tier. High D tier.
Okay, all right.
Very, very decent. We played. There are 3 different sheets for each game. They get better as you get further into it because there's a little bit more to them. One of them, especially the Krypton, starts out way too simple. I think the strongest one is the Gardens one. And yeah, you got that in perfect order. Wow, what intuition you have. But yeah, I mean, again, I don't love roll and writes, and I think these are among his weaker ones, even with the cool little pencil rolling twists. So.
Okay.
That's Pick-a-Pen.
Poison?
And Poison. Poison for me is, where is poison? Where's the poison? Low C tier. Okay. This is another one of those trick takers that kind of reminds me of Foodie Forest, actually, where you don't just play once around, you play until like the pot explodes and then somebody claims it at that point. But in this case, usually you don't want to claim it. Pot explodes, that's like negative points. But if you have the most of a potion, then it's then you don't have to score that at all. And there are other games that play on these concepts that I think this game inspired a lot. It's one of the older ones. It maybe hasn't aged well against those or held its own against those as well. It's one that I would happily play again, but it's not one that I need to own. So that's Poison.
Pollen.
Pollen. This is a new version of Samurai the card game. Okay, to give context, and no rules changed, but a very different production, right? And for me, this is a B tier actually. Pollen is and full disclosure, yeah. So we publish the Criminal Capers games, right? I'm biased towards those. I'm biased towards Cascadero, Cascadito. A lot of these games. Pollen is from publisher All Play, who I'm friends with and I work with. So yeah, take that with a grain of salt. But I think this is a great card game, honestly. Even though some people are like, "Oh, I'd rather just play Samurai the card game or Samurai the board game." Pollen still is very, very fun. I have a blast with it. And this production improves on the old edition because the old edition, the cards would spread out way too far. This new version replaces like half the cards with little pretty tokens. Mm-hmm. And so it cuts the table space in half, which is great. The production from Beth Sobel is beautiful. It's very colorful, noisy game, but in a pleasant way, I think. But the thing that makes this game interesting is like the cards can spread out in any direction, and there's always a token on deck which either has like 1, 2, or 3 of a kind of different bugs that you're competing over, just like Samurai has different casts you're competing over. But wherever I line up my card is where that token goes, and it has to be next to somebody else's card. But then if somebody has like a really strong B card out and then there's a beetle on deck token coming out and I have a beetle card in my hand, I can just sidle my card up to theirs and I already have a head start on a token that they have no contention for. And like little decisions like that make this a lot of fun to play to me. So if you like Samurai, but you're not, I guess, I mean, this is a rude thing to say, but a Samurai snobist where you're like, I'd rather only play Samurai ever, then I think you would really appreciate this game. Oddly, I think it's so beautiful and naturistic that I think it gives a lot of people the wrong vibe because it's still a very mean game. Oh yeah, 100%. But it's great. I really like Pollen. B tier.
All right. This is Prosperity. Prosperity, mm-hmm. I think is like I'd put it in the same spot. The production is really bad. It's really bad, and it's a really strange game, but there's nothing like it that I've played. And I think this is one of the few Reiner Knizia co-designs that are out there. And I think that it works very well because there's a lot of Reiner in here, but then there's also a lot of like just something else entirely that I think works with it really well. Like, have you ever had chocolate covered cinnamon bears?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So it doesn't seem like it should work, but they're delicious. And
yeah, absolutely.
That's how I feel about Prosperity. It's a matter of momentum, of like, you build your city towards scoring certain things, but as soon as that's scored in like the area you're in, you can ignore it entirely until you get to the next stack of tiles. And so it's a matter of like, oh, I'm building energy right now, and then I get a ton of energy when the next energy tile comes out, and I'm just like, I'm covering up all the energy stuff so that I can get money, and it's really, really cool.
If I was a betting man, I haven't played this, but I've heard good things from you and other people, and I would guess this is a really strong candidate for getting a new version eventually, because we seem to be in a Renaissance of like, we're going through his biggest stuff now, but now we're getting into like with Zoo Vadis more of his hidden stuff and maybe Orongo and stuff that publishers are uncovering and maybe dusting off and improving a bit. And this seems like a good candidate.
I think more than any other game of his I've played, this one deserves a better production.
Nice.
Chin.
Oh, too bad that I have control of this.
Where are you putting it?
It's funny because this game, to give you guys some context, in the Reiner Knizia enthusiast Discord guild, this was the highest ranked. What is it? The hidden gem or like underrated game? The most overrated, underrated game is what I call it, and so I put it at C tier for Kim. And here's my reasoning. So it's a tile placement game from Reiner. It's a domino game from Reiner, where you draw a domino and you put it out, and you're trying to build these clusters, these communities. I don't know what they are, of the matching color, and then you get to throw down your palaces on top once you've built it big enough. And when you reach cities, and you're racing to put out all of your, I'm probably slaughtering this right now, all your pagoda little pieces. And
it's a race.
Yeah, but it's honestly quite light, which is great in some respects, and it's not too long. It's pretty quick. It's pretty breezy, and I've had fun with it. But compared to other light tile placement Knizia games, I haven't liked it as much, and I think it's just, I don't know, it's very subtle in a lot of ways. And I've tried to give it multiple plays because I know a lot of people love it in our community, but it hasn't quite sung for me like it has for others.
Okay, I'm calling in the Medici B tier, and I'm gonna say like,
oh my goodness, that hurts.
Or high B tier.
Okay, that feels a little bit better. I mean,
fine.
Still putting it above a lot of games I'd much rather play, but I can, it does have a lot of fans, right?
I've got, I think, at least 20 plays of Chin under my belt.
Wow.
I've got all 4 of the maps, which was very difficult. It was very difficult to track down the expansion boards.
Sure.
But for me, it was well worth it. I'm playing online. I've played a few games online with some pals from the Knizia enthusiasts Discord. And I like playing more at 2 or 3 players, but I've been very much enjoying my plays at 4 with those guys, even if I am very cruel sometimes for no reason. I really, really like Chin. It's fast and it's very simple, and my mom can beat me at it. So again, it's got the mom point. Like, it's right there.
The mom point. That's got to be worth something. I can live with B tier. Maybe not that high on the B tier, but I'll let you have it since you've been so easy.
I let you put Medici at the bottom of B tier. You let me put Chin at the top. Ooh. Okay. The quest for Dorado.
All right.
This might be spicy. But for me, like, this is perfection. I have been playing this game since I think 2018. I think it came out in 2017. I got it for Christmas from someone 2018. It's been in my collection ever since, but earlier this year, I think in March or something, I bought the new Nordic version in preparation of Dangers in Muisca, which we will get to. And for me, like, El Dorado on its own is an S tier, but with the expansions, it is gold for me. Absolutely. 100% unadulterated gold. One of my favorite games by the good doctor, if not my favorite game by Reiner Knizia.
I love it. This was high S tier for me, but I'm not even going to fight you on this because I'm with you. It is one of the greatest of the only living doctor.
We've broken into the gold tier.
We've broken, baby. It took a while. This was actually the first Knizia I ever played, I think. And at the time, it didn't necessarily like knock my socks off, but because again, it's very clean. A lot of his games are so clean, and they can be subtle, and they can take time to marinate, But this one, the more you play it, the more you're like, shoot, this is a good game with like, it's a deck builder, but it's interactive. You're racing and you're blocking each other, and you're trying to adapt on the fly and plan ahead. And the market system is way better than any other deck builder I've seen. Usually you get the Dominion where it's like everything's available and let's all scan the market like robots and figure out the optimal way to play this game. Or you get the opposite end of the spectrum with like Clank. And these are games I enjoy too. I'm not trying to hate on them, but I don't think they have as good of market systems. With Clank, you just have a random deck where the cards come out and it's like, here's what you can buy. And sometimes that's really good for you, and sometimes that's really bad for you. But Quest for El Dorado harnesses or sits right on the fence and straddles it and rides into the sunset by letting you pick from a few options, but then once one slot is empty, you can pick anything and bring it in. And now there are 3 more cards that you and other people can buy. And that's a cool system. But yeah, like you say, it's a masterpiece of a deck building racing game.
And like on the racing side of it, if you've only ever played, talking to our audience, maybe of just like 2 or 3 people here, if you've only ever played the Quest for El Dorado with the maps that are included in the rules booklet, go to Board Game Geek, go to the files section, go to the flipping community maps that are there, and like see just how robust the map making system in this game can be without adding in any of the expansions. It just rocketed up for me. And then I was like, oh, maybe I don't need the expansion. And then I got the expansions, and I was like, oh, I love having the expansion.
Speaking of which, which one do we want to talk about first?
Here's what I'm thinking. I'm going to go ahead and place them, and then you can talk about them and whether or not you agree with me.
Let's do it.
I think Heroes and Hexes, is low B, high C.
I can live with that.
Muisca is S tier, easy, like easiest.
Yeah, I agree.
Of my entire life. And then where would you put Golden Temples?
I think Golden Temples was it's a standalone expansion. You can play it on its own, or you can combine it with the original game, right? And the premise of it is different. You're not racing to the finish line. You are racing to collect 3 things and then get back to the starting line. There were some interesting twists there. I think it was stronger before Dangers in Muisca existed, which in some ways, one of the modules of Dangers in Muisca just kind of adds in that race to pick up these things objective, and kind of does it in a cleaner, better way, I think. So I've had some weird plays of this where like 2 people had a standoff when you can go in different directions. 2 people met at a bottleneck, and both of them refused to move. And so I made it to the end like way ahead of them because they just wouldn't step out of each other's way, and they helped me win the game. It was weird. So this to me is like high C tier, maybe. I don't know. You haven't played it, right?
Yeah. I think for me, it is kind of invalidated by Dangers of Muisca because it's like it takes that interesting aspect of you have to stop at certain checkpoints, but Dangers of Muisca, the checkpoints can be put anywhere on the map. They can be put on the side, they can be put in the middle. You can cover up certain like tiles of the base, like tiles of the game in really interesting ways.
And you have to make a tough trade. You have to like trash a sometimes very valuable card to get the token, right? Yeah. Which is cool.
Like Dangers of Muisca is what like elevates El Dorado into gold tier for me.
Although I guess the one kind of cool thing is you can combine Golden Temples and the original, so you race into El Dorado and then from there you're racing to pick up stuff, and that was kind of cool but also very long. So it's kind of low B tier, high C tier for me, so that's fine right there.
For Heroes and Hexes, I put it low B tier. I think I actually had it at like C tier, honestly. I'd probably put it there. I think on its own it adds an interesting amount, but I actually made a bunch of like maps just for Heroes and Hexes plus the base game. And I haven't actually played any of them because I haven't had the time to. But I haven't had a ton of luck with just this in the base game. But taking the modules from Heroes and Hexes, I do love like the animal companions. I play with those every single game now. And I think some of them are better than others, and I give the better ones to less experienced players. And I think it's a great way to like handicap more experienced players. But playing this together with Dangers of Muisca is like transcendent. It's so good.
Yeah, we combined all 3 together one time, and we tried like a community map, and I think we chose the wrong map because sometimes you get stinkers with suggested maps if there's not like solid design principles underneath, which I didn't fully recognize, and so it made the game like really it kind of bogged the game down and made it long. But I think that was more a fault of the map structure than it was the expansion. But I agree, high C tier. There's some really cool, interesting stuff going on with the curses and hexes and all that. So
I love El Dorado so much. All right, this is you, Quo Vadis.
Ooh, Quo Vadis. When I first played this game, I was like, it's kind of like Municipium and Orongo. I was like, why isn't this better regarded? Because it's a pure negotiation game with so much bite, and with a lot of principles that held up, obviously, because we republished it in a new version later. But for me, it'd probably be either high B tier or low A tier. There are some issues with the game, which we tried to address with Zoo Vadis, the new version, such as it doesn't work as well at lower player counts. There's like a whole slew of different recommended variants and modules that you can play with, because this game has been around since 92 or so. And so there's a bit of an identity crisis to Quo Vadis that we tried to clean up as well. And people tend to prefer it with more players. So yeah, it's probably best at 5, but it's still really good at 4. But it's very dry as well, dry looking especially. But the way it brings out that core tension of like, do I race ahead to the finish because I need to get into the star exhibit to for my points to matter, or do I hang back and try to have more leverage in voting for other people who need me and getting points from them? So am I trying to just get in to qualify, or am I trying to stay back to get more points? And it's still a great game. I mean, some people play Zoo Vadis and they're like, Quo Vadis was a terrible game and Zoo Vadis is excellent. And I'm like, I don't think it's that bad. I think it was a really good game, but a few issues that we tried to address. A lot of fun. I love Quo Vadis. So
okay. Ooh, next up we have Ra. And I think Ra.
Yeah.
Ra. Like, if you were talking about the best games by Reiner Knizia and Ra is not in the runnings, then you're wrong. Like, yeah, it is totally. It is fast. It is dumb. It is like tense, gorgeous, simple. I don't know what else there is to say about Ra.
Yeah, Ra is, in my opinion, I've played dozens upon dozens upon dozens of pure auctioning games and games with auctioning mechanisms, and then you could argue that all games have auctions in them, right? Because area majority and stuff like that. Ra is the best. Ra is the best auctioning game there is, and I will stand by that till the day I die. It is a stone cold classic, gold tier, easiest gold tier we ever did. Well, one of the easiest. And yeah, I'm with you. What else is there to say? There's a new version from Ian O'Toole and 25th Century Games, and they knocked it out of the park. You should play Ra. You should play Ra. And if you have played Ra, you should play more Ra. Yep, absolutely. Speaking of Ra, Ra the dice game. Ra the dice game. This is C tier for me. Yep. This I'm glad we're in agreement on this, because I think a lot of people actually this is like their favorite Knizia dice game. They rank it a lot higher than we do. But for me, it's Yahtzee mixed with a lot of complex things going on, and I don't know. It's just you're trying to evoke the feelings of Ra, but without all the juicy auctions and stuff of Ra. And I don't know, that sometimes your turn can fall flat when you roll one or more times and don't get what you want, and then it's like, well, that was my turn. So I don't know. I don't think it's as dramatic or exciting as other Knizia dice games, and personally, I'd prefer to play a lot of those other ones over this. Yeah, I think when it comes to dice games, I want one of two things. I want drama, or I want like spicy decisions, and this is kind of just in the middle with both. Mm-hmm. And yeah, okay. There it is, Ra dice game. Rapido, where are you putting this? Oh, this is solid B tier for me. I think it's one of Reiner's strongest dice games out there, but I don't know. What do you feel about it? I haven't played it, so I really want to. Oh, okay. Yeah, this one is a crowd pleaser. I think anyone you show it to is really going to enjoy it. So it's an easy one to recommend. Although there isn't currently a North American published version, which makes it a little harder to track down, but it's not too hard. You can get it from like Amazon Germany and stuff. So this is basically a racing game where you're pushing your luck as you roll dice, and take a little bit of that hierarchy element from Pu Mafiosi and mix it with push your luck dice, and you get a really, really cool game in Rapido. You can roll as many times as you want until you roll an X, and if you roll an X, then you have to move back a space. But if you get a really high roll, you might try to position your dice really high on the hierarchy, and if you stay there till the start of your next turn, then you get to move that many spaces, whatever the hierarchy value is, towards the finish line. But other people can knock you off if they go lower than you and roll a higher dice result. So it's great. It's a great game. I probably recommend it. I mean, it's honestly, it's pretty good at all player counts, like 3 to 6. This is another one that's simple enough. I've introduced it to my 4-year-old, and she loves it.
You'll love to see it.
But it's a killer filler. Yeah, solid B tier at the very least. And some people will probably fight me and say it deserves to be higher, but I think I don't like it as much as Gang of Dice and maybe one other dice game, but it's probably a top 3 Knizia dice game. So if that's what you're into, then you should definitely play it.
Okay. Res Publica. For me,
Res Publica
is kind of a high F tier.
Oh.
I think it's interesting. I think the auction or the trading mechanic where you give one half of it, or it's like, I'm looking for this card, but you can't say what you want. Like the other players then offer you something. Oh, well, I have one of these cards, but I want this card. And so you're kind of making these halves of trades, and you can do either side, whether you want something or you're offering something. It's just boring. It's just boring.
I think it finishes stronger than it starts. Yeah, it kind of starts out pretty slow, right? But I do like the interesting unique negotiation limits. It's like Bonanza, but instead of your hand orientation being restricted, it's the trades themselves that are restricted. But it definitely pales in comparison to Bonanza because it's not quite as social and evoking, I think. But for me, I had it D tier because I do think it was enjoyable when we played it, but I wasn't like, I need to play this again. It wasn't as painful as Catastrophe for sure.
I did play this twice, so
you played it twice.
I did, and that like.
And you put F. Oh man, yeah. So it's pretty low. Poor Res Publica. Yeah. My other issue was like you kind of get a runaway leader if somebody can draw more cards early on, and then that can really aggregate over time, and it's hard to stop them. So anyway,
Rheinländer.
This is a C tier Knizia for me. I think there's some really cool stuff going on in this game, but I introduced it to some non-gamers. I introduced it to some gamers, and it wasn't necessarily a big hit with either group. But I know this is one of those hidden gems that some groups really love. And I think there's enough interesting stuff going on here, kind of inspired by Acquire, inspired a little bit by Tigris and Euphrates, where things can merge and you can control things and you're kind of inching towards each other in a lot of ways. And I want to see a new version of this. Honestly, that's where I land on this. I want to see a new version that brings out the best parts of this game and kind of shaves down the worst parts. But to me, it's like it weirdly straddles the fence between like being too opaque for non-gamers to really catch on to, especially early on, but also too light and luck driven and like less control offering for gamers to be fully satisfied by. So it's a hard one. It's like, who is this game for? I think the new version needs to push in either direction to really target a specific audience.
I agree with you. I've had a pretty good track record so far with introducing this to more casual gamers.
Yeah.
But it is something where I kind of look at it and I'm like, I know this isn't going to stay in my collection forever. It's nice to have when I have 5 people who are willing to give it a shot and buy into it.
Yeah.
My copy also smells of vinegar, strangely.
It does. Yeah. That production is a weird smell to it. It's the same with mine.
Oh, really? Okay. All right.
Yeah.
So I'm
about that.
with it being like high C tier because I also think the box is gorgeous, and the way that like
it's cool.
The map builds out as the game goes along, I really enjoy the look of it. So
yeah, I love the premise of this game. So I really hope a publisher and Reiner kind of work together to figure out like how do we evolve this concept into something that's really sharp, and I think it could do really well. So
okay,